Have you ever felt excluded or judged or ostracized for something that you had no control over? Maybe it happened to you at a church, maybe it happened to you at school, maybe it happens to you at work. Wherever it is, it's one of the most frustrating, powerless feelings, and Jesus has something good to say about it. And that's what we're talking about this week.
Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching.
Hello all. Welcome once again to the Kindred UMC pre-recorded live show, coming to you not live but pre-recorded from my front room, aka Kindred Studio A. My name is Chris Hayden. I am the pastor of Kindred UMC.
Hi, I'm Brandon. I'm the trustees chair, and my other title, I don't know. I forgot it.
Aren't you our local
queer sex positive?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Friend.
I don't know how much that's going to come into play this time, but we'll see.
Let's see what I work in.
That's the beauty of the panel discussion, isn't it? We don't know what we're going to get into, do we?
No, I don't.
I'm Taylor. I'm the resident gay exploring candidate. And my eyes are on fire, so ignore me if I start crying.
Once again. So we're recording before Easter, but I'm going to do our Easter stuff live. We'll record and stream that. And so we're going to do, and I don't exactly know what we're going to do after Easter. I haven't chosen the series. So I've just got a one-off, and I was going to put it in the middle of Lent. So we're a little out of order, and that's just the way it is. But this is still good stuff, and this is still a good thing from the Gospel of John. Excuse me. So we're going to be reading from the Gospel of John. We did a video by your schedule. We will have done a video a few weeks ago up there. I'll have Ann put a link up there about Jesus playing in the dirt, and he saves a woman who's caught in adultery and accused by a bunch of angry hypocrites. And we are going to hear another story where Jesus plays in the dirt again, and it's important to note that they literally happen in the same festival. So that was the Festival of Booths, and this is right after that. So this is still in the Festival of Booths. And the important thing about the Festival of Booths is that it's right before winter, when people really need water to grow crops. And so a large part of the Festival of Booths is please God send rain. And so there's a lot of water metaphors. And again, that video that I'll make Ann link to, you can hear a lot more about that. So we are reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 9, verses 1 through, I think it's 11, but who knows? And they sound like this. As he walked along, he being Jesus, as he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone who looks like him." He kept saying, "I am the man," but they kept asking him, "Then how are your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." Pretty basic stuff. This is part of a much larger story. Eventually, the blind man who can now see gets dragged before the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the courts, basically, and they question him, and they're like, what happened? What do you say about this guy Jesus? And they're mad because Jesus did this on the Sabbath, and because they can't help themselves but to be jerks about everything, much like some people that I've been arguing with on the internet. So, first of all, let's just start questions, comments, concerns. Let's do our best to sum up what we heard. So what did you hear?
Man was blind from birth, right? Has always been blind. And then I had the thought of like, these people were not without doctors. They were not without medicine. It's not like they were just dumb. Like, no, his eyes were just dirty. He just like cleaned his eyes off. Like someone had probably like actually said like, no, like he's
That
blind.
seems unlikely.
Right?
To me.
That he wasn't just like,
He just had dirt on his eyes.
like he was just like a little crusty. Like
And
no.
yeah, I do that to Jonah, my dog, every single morning because he's too old and he can't
Just
rub
like-
his face anymore. I have to rub it for him.
Like probably like a well-practiced doctor was like, yep, this child is blind and will be blind all his life. And then he was. So like it's probably actually very significant.
So, do you remember what the disciples asked when they saw him?
I was just gonna say they said who sinned, so that like because he was blind. Like,
What did you do?
what'd you do to end
Yeah.
up
So,
being
what do you
blind?
make of that?
Which, like, what a wild first
Right. What a weird first like question.
thought.
Yeah. So it is weird, of course, by our standards, which is why I'm asking about it.
Right.
Not to them.
Yeah.
That would have been a normal, regular question. So, what does that tell you about about their beliefs?
Generational curses were alive and well at the time.
Yeah. So like, so according to their understanding, why was this man blind?
Because he or someone in his
parents
household
Yeah.
had like sinned against the Lord and therefore they were being punished through him.
So what does that tell you about what they think about God?
Punitive.
Yeah. That he's like, I don't want to say the word evil because that's not what I mean, but that was the first
But,
word that
like-
came to my head.
Like, judgmental,
Like
punitive,
yeah.
Vengeful.
wrathful,
Yeah.
vengeful. Yeah. Some
Like,
and,
gotcha.
and I dare say
A jerk.
I dare
Right.
say vengeance is evil. So
Yeah.
like, you're not. I don't disagree with you,
Yeah.
know, but like this was their understanding of God, This
Like God's gonna get you if
their
like,
yeah. So their
you
first
do some
question:
crazy shit.
Who sinned? This guy's blind. That's not fair. Who sinned?
Yeah.
And then what does Jesus answer?
No one. He was put here so I could show. There was
Yeah,
very
so
specific
for,
words.
yeah, for the
but, like,
glory of the Lord,
yeah, yeah.
essentially, to reveal God's glory. He says, no one. That's not how the world works, guys.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And then he spits in the mud, or spits in the dirt, makes mud. So again, what's the focal point of the Festival of Booths?
All about water, making stuff grow.
That's right. And again, the previous video about the woman caught in adultery, there's a specific text from Zechariah. No, is it Zechariah? Oh gosh, I've been doing so many prophecies. I think it's Jeremiah. I can't remember. Go watch that other video. But there's a specific prophecy that would have been preached on that is essentially about thirst and water, and then it ends with those who deny the coming of deny the ways of Yahweh, their names will be written in the dirt. And so there's a lot of like back and forth about water and dirt, and that's what explains that last one. That's why there's something about the mud here. There's also some reality to if you had a wound, a common medical practice of the day would have been to make mud and pack the wound with mud because it'll actually protect from infection and help it heal. So like that was actually like a custom that would have been understood.
Rub some dirt in it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where we get it from.
Right.
Like it's not like it's fun to say that, especially if you grew up in Florida with skinned knees and bare feet. But like there is something to rub some dirt in it was a real actual technique, and so that's what Jesus does. He says, no, this man's blind so that God can reveal some glory right now, and we didn't read this because it'll go on for the whole dang chapter, and we'll be here for a longer time than I wanted. But when they drag him before the courts, like one of the things that's implied here. So if the blindness, according to their beliefs, is caused by sin, and that's not just the disciples, that's like a cultural belief. So blindness from birth is caused by someone's sin. So what does Jesus do about it?
Flips on his head like he does everything else. He said, no, I make this not about sin. I make this about like something to be perfected so I can celebrate it, so that I can celebrate God.
So in a way, and yes, yeah, like obviously. So in a way, what Jesus is effectively doing is he's claiming an authority that only God has. He's claiming an authority to wash away sin. And he's telling them, like, no, you don't understand how the world works. I know how the world works. And in order to understand that, you kind of have to read this whole section. And I really encourage you to do it, because you'll find that Jesus makes these two major statements that are like self-testimony. He testifies about himself. Before the woman in adultery at the water festival, he says, all who are thirsty, come to me, I'll give you living water. And it's like this big, profound, he's making a big statement about himself. After that, and before this, he makes another statement about being the light of the world. And then he makes a statement about, I didn't come to judge, but even if I was the judge, I'm only the judge because my Father sent me. And so there's this connection between judgment, which is where this started. Who sinned? What's the judgment? The connection between judgment and being sent. Do you remember the name of the place where he was sent to? Yeah.
I wasn't sure what that was, like sent. I was like, why is it about his?
I thought it was one of those two at first.
Yeah, and he says, I am the light of the world. Blindness, was darkness, obviously.
Right.
I am the light of the world who is sent by my Father in heaven. I alone have the authority to judge, which then begs the question, what kind of judge is this Messiah going to be? Well, he's going to be one that wipes away sin. He's going to be one that wipes away iniquity and offers forgiveness and grace. And all the idiots out there who keep telling me God's not gracious and should be a judge and a jerk and wrathful, you go get bent. You are wrong, and I went to seminary just to prove it. So, sorry, I've been arguing on the internet a lot lately with people who insist that God's a jerk. Like, no, that is the opposite of the whole point of the Bible. Anywho.
But I will say, someone that grew up in the church, we were taught to be afraid of God sometimes. In some situations, like in some people's cases. In my case, I was a little afraid of God, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I get it.
Can we talk a little bit about Scripture was written in different languages. Different words in different languages have different connotations. For example, I'm learning to speak French, and I've always kind of learned to speak, but when it's cold outside, you say il fait chaud. And that's not, it is cold. That would be il est chaud. A is. Fait is like it makes. So like it makes cold, which doesn't make any sense in English.
Yeah.
If you translate it to English, you're like, what does this mean?
Yep.
Same thing with fears God.
Yeah.
Fear God, the word for fear in this cultural context has such a deeper, more nuanced and broader meaning. It's not be afraid of God, which is that's kind of the connotation we have in English. It's one of reverence. It's one of respect. It's one of awe. It's one of just like if you've ever been moved by a sunset and just overwhelmed with how small you are and how big the universe is, that's fear God.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this language, when we don't really give the cultural context and the nuance of the language enough heed, we end up with really bunk and faulty ways of understanding God. And I have them too. I'm not going to say that I have this perfect understanding of God. I definitely don't. But the one thing I am certain on is that God is gracious. Yeah. That God is a God of grace. And if that wasn't the case, we would all be screwed. Yeah. Because none of us have a perfect understanding of God. And all of us screw up all the time. It just happens. It's a part of our flawed human nature. And without God's grace, we would have no ability to actually relate to each other and to God, and yet we do. So it's just the fact that we're sitting here talking and living and breathing and enjoying aspects of life is proof of God's grace, Yeah. So so the fear language, I think it's time to maybe adopt some new ways to talk about it, just given our current cultural zeitgeist and what that word and the connotations, and also our bad track record on communicating it as the church. I think it's time to probably get rid of that. So the other thing that I want to talk about, and I think this is the real major point, Jesus, by wiping away this man's blindness and AKA the perception that he is sinful and being punished. The other thing that Jesus is doing is essentially re-including him into society and specifically the synagogue, the church society, like not just society, but the spiritual community. And so, this is not just an act of like, oh, Jesus does magic, he must be God. This is a statement about how we're supposed to follow God. Are we going to be people who are exclusive and who set thresholds to keep people out of God's kingdom? Or are we going to follow Jesus, who is wiping those away, who's tearing, constantly, especially in Holy Week? Good Lord, look at the week before Jesus is crucified, and you'll start to understand why all the Pharisees and Sadducees were really mad at him and wanted to execute him. Because he just he literally turns over their tables, but he also turns the tables a lot, like metaphorically. So, what has your experience been with inclusion and exclusion, especially in the church? When have you felt excluded? When have you felt included? And you don't have to do specifically church, but just in general, can you talk about stories around that? What does that mean to you?
You want to cheers when the odds are going to be the same?
We didn't plan this, but we just happened to get the gay people, the gay Christians, to be a part of this one. And you know how great the church does with anything queer at all ever.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this little thing called losing everybody because you came out in a church setting?
Wild.
Do
you want to take it away first?
Sure. If y'all watch live show, I talk about this all the time. But I came out in 2019.
I think it's helpful because there's going to be people who see this for the first time anyway. So go ahead.
So I came out in 2019.
It's an important story.
And I was heavily involved in the church. Like I was in our youth pastoring program. Like I was doing all kinds of stuff. And when I came out, there was around the same time, there was a guy going around harassing women and girls in the church. And he was my age. Assaulting them, yes. Harassing, assaulting, stalking.
Yeah, not like calling them names and making them feel bad, like criminal behavior.
Yes. And when I came out, I was basically like shunned. And then when everything about him came out, he was told everything will be fine. We'll put you in a different program. Like we're just going to take you away from these kids. And then they put him with the actual kid. Like we were in the youth group. They put him with the actual kids. And then it was like, okay, well that doesn't make no dang sense.
We can't trust you not to have sex with, and I only avoid the R word because YouTube is so stupid.
Yes, but it was R and can we say molesting?
I don't know.
Okay, well anyways, bleep that if we need to. The M word as well. And when that came out, I was basically told that he's a boys will be boys, I understand, was the direct quote.
Locker room
from
talk.
The youth pastor looked me in my face in front of one of the children that he had done this to and said, boys will be boys, I understand. I said, this is scary, I want to get out. I don't want to be here anymore. That was my last night being there.
Trust that instinct.
That was my last night.
You are correct.
That was my last night. I don't remember being there after that because I blocked the rest of it out. And I lost half of my girl group because they were all stopped coming to church because they were just, this was being allowed to be behavior. But anyways, for me being excluded, that he was given the chance to reform because we can fix boys who are bad, but you can't accept
fix gay.
You can't fix gay. So
here's the I know
So
you can try.
You can try,
and people have tried.
But there's less motivating factors for me to be fixed and come back to you.
Well,
yes.
So my big So the debate I've been having with more conservative literal people has been essentially, I think they would say, we have to have moral standards. You can't just let anybody in. Otherwise, the Bible doesn't mean anything. Because if you're just, if the Bible says don't be gay and you're just going to let people be gay, then what are we doing here? That's kind of their argument.
Okay.
My counter argument has always been, you don't understand the fullness of the Bible either. So who's to stop me from saying to you, I disagree with your interpretation, so you're not allowed? Where do we start to draw the line? When, because I don't agree that we have in the Methodist Church, I don't agree that we should split over the issue. I believe what we should do is allow and trust each individual person to work it out with God and arrive at their own conclusion. And like, certainly we can help each other, but only when that help is asked for, only when that help is welcome, not because a lot of people want to help by like banging you over the head with the Bible and saying don't be gay, you know, like that's
Trust
not
me,
helpful.
I guarantee you Brandon knows we've tried to pay the gay away. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's
I've prayed about a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff has worked.
It's a bad idea.
gay didn't work.
Yeah. So like
Still a raging lesbian over here.
I'm still baffled by the wild hypocrisy of this thing that like, well, that's the one that we can't let. It's like, well, you're being a judgmental jerk, and really didn't want to say jerk, really wanted to say some other things. But like, you're being a terrible, horrible person that no one even wants to be around.
Yeah.
That's also a sin. So you're not welcome either by your standards.
Yeah. And that
So,
was
like,
the hard part about...
What are you doing here,
That was the hard part about my situation specifically, is because they were going on at the same time. And I was literally told by my children's minister, who was like my mentor, like I loved her to death. And she literally looked at me when I came out crying to her on her couch at like 11 o'clock one night, because I just stopped going to church because I was having like full-blown panic attacks every time I go to church. A, because I was
it was a
M-word
dangerous
by
place.
this person, and
Yeah,
B, because I was gay. So
It's literally a dangerous
it was literally
place
a dangerous
for you to
place.
be.
And I have found out some more tea on the church, but it's fine. We'll get into that later. But it was hard that all of this was going on at one time, because I was like, why is it me that's the issue? I'm not hurting anybody.
Yeah, so
I'm hurting myself
this is the
by
hypocrisy.
going through this.
It's the there are certain sins that we're fine with. We're not fine with, but we're like, yeah, you get a pass because we believe you.
Or like, you can God will forgive you if you
Yeah.
just repent. And it's like,
But then there's
you murdered somebody.
Yeah, but
like,
then
what?
and that's why I've always said, because I'm not for we need to have absolutely everyone allowed no matter what. I'm not for that. What I am for, though, is the line needs to be when harm is being done.
Yeah.
And the people who get to define that harm are the people who are being victimized, not other people who have no idea what it's like to suffer anything under that. So like, and that's always been my thing, like if two men are in a consensual, loving relationship, and there's some other person who has no idea what it's like saying that's bad and wrong, like you don't get to define harm. The person I'm going to ask about harm is going to be the two men. Are you being harmed by this man who loves you? Are you being harmed by this man who loves you?
Right.
Okay, well they
Or are
say
you
they're
literally
fine,
harming
and
Right.
you being uncomfortable does not reach the threshold of harm, so deal with it and avert your
Maybe
eyes
get a
if you have
therapist.
to. Yeah, like, right?
Look away.
Yeah, like
Put the mud back on your eyes. And
yeah, right. Yeah, go back to being blind if you want.
And
you know?
that's what's next, is if we apply that to like our current story here. Like, homosexuality is not the sin that is being wiped away. Like, Jesus isn't walking
Right.
up to me and
Yeah.
cleansing me of that. Like, that's not the issue here.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Allowing sin, because I do agree that there are sins that I will not be able to accurately judge based on my standard.
Yeah.
It's like I'm wildly okay with acknowledging my limitation and my inability to be a gatekeeper and a judge of other people's spirituality.
Right.
So like, that's fine with me. That's why grace is so important. So like, I happen to agree with you. I don't think being gay is a sin. I don't think being trans is a sin. I don't think there's anything. I think it's an expression of God's variety in creation. But whatever. Let's say you disagree with that. Let's give the devil his due. You disagree with that. You think it really is a sin. Okay, don't do it then.
Right. That's what I don't understand. Is like, why? It's how I feel about abortion too. It's truly how I feel about abortion too. Okay, if you think it's bad, don't do it. I don't understand. I don't understand how that's such a hard concept.
Well, the abortion one I do understand. While I agree with you, I think, and this comes from working in the hospital, I do have a little more empathy on the other, because there are people who genuinely believe that it is the life of a child that's being terminated.
And I understand that, but
I understand
it's the same logic of
if you feel that way, I understand why it would be a much bigger, because that really is a debate about harm. And if a child is being murdered, then that is a harm. And so I can understand drawing a line in the sand on that issue. If I really believed that, I wouldn't want to go to a preacher who preached the opposite.
But that's how I feel. Like, that's how I feel about a lot of issues. It's like, okay, if you think that's like, it's like people that are, you could name any, like, not wearing.
Well, like premarital sex is another one that comes up.
Yeah.
We can debate about harm, but the way I'm defining harm has to do with consent and has to do with like serious long-term change in a person for the negative, and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to have a standard internally for myself about when sex is okay and when it's not. And because I'm a pastor and because I have a commitment to the office of pastor, I will truthfully answer any question about the theology around that, what the Methodist Church's stance is, and why, and I've committed to that. But like, if you get me just like around coffee and you're like, what? It's like, in this day and age, like, I don't know, man. Like, maybe we need to adjust some. I don't know. Like, and I really do mean I don't know. I don't know. So, and therefore, because I don't know, I'm certainly not going to exclude somebody from my community based on the fact that you're living with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever. Like, I'm not willing to say you
That's
can't
not my
be part
line in
of
the
this.
sand.
Right. Like, and there are people out there who will call me names and tell me I'm stupid and call the seminary that ever deigned to give me a degree a den of vipers, and I know because they literally have called me these things because I deign to accept people who disagree with me about certain moral issues when it comes to theology.
Like, if you're excluding people based on sin, like, that's a hard, like, how does anybody ever come back? How do you ever unexclude?
That's exactly the problem. The whole point, I keep on saying this over and over again, this is the whole point of the Easter message. And I hope that you'll go back and look at Easter, because it will have come out last week. But what I plan on talking about, if Jesus is willing to die for this, it begs the question, what was his message? What was the first thing he preached? And when it says Jesus came to announce his God, like after the temptation in the wilderness, after he was baptized, the first thing he began to preach and announce, the kingdom of heaven has come near. Jesus came to get heaven into us, not the other way around. We're not trying to get into heaven. Jesus is trying to get heaven into us. And the good news is that he loves you enough to offer you any, there is a choice, because we can also choose hell. Heaven is here, but hell is here too. We can choose division and judgment and harm each other and take advantage of each other and sacrifice long-term connection for immediate selfish gain. We can choose hell. But we have the chance, because of God's grace and because of what Jesus has done for us, because the nature of the judge is to wash away iniquity and sin and to re-include us and rehabilitate us back into the community. Because that's God's nature, we have this opportunity to choose heaven here and now. It is at hand. It has come near. And through the grace of God, we can participate in it. Any final thoughts?
Sounds great, Chef.
All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.